LBR LBO Debrief, Business Climate Outlook of 2016.
Jim, banking. Supposedly, a very traditional business that doesn't change a lot, but we have seen huge changes. And we'll come to that later when we talk about technology and how some banks are running just on mobile phones. But talking of Standard Chartered, again, what's your big challenge for growth? Or what's the opportunity that you see? You've been here for about a year, less than a year now. The bank has been here for more than 100 years, 150 years or more. How do you see your big growth challenge? What is it, and how do you plan to address it?
Definitely growth is at the center of our strategy. And as a rule of thumb, we want to try to achieve about 2.5 times GDP growth as a metric to know that we're continuing to add value and improve our business. In the service industry, especially in ours, it's all about people. And we're very proud of the people we have working at Standard Chartered Bank. And one of the big challenges is empowering them, as you guys have mentioned already, and making sure that the collaboration effort is as strong as it can be. Oftentimes, certain cultural barriers exist that you try to knock down and improve upon. Because in a collaborative, service-oriented environment with top quality people, your customers and clients then will feel that difference. That's not going to get us away from charging more interest rate or anything like that to them, but it'll make a big, But it'll make a big difference differentiating ourselves, which is important. But then on top of that, our growth and our strategy for growth is commensurate with the nation's growth and its ability then to allow us to help, finance and encourage and structure more growth and development, more foreign direct investment. And for that, the economic conditions have to be right. So whether I am trying to help promote wealth generation in my priority banking customers or the employees of the corporations that I work with, the corporations themselves and their own businesses and expansions, and also in helping the overall country, the finance ministry or central bank, promote additional investment, that is dependent on obviously the entire package being well managed and being progressive. So we do emphasize a lot. We spend a lot of time with the sovereign, guiding and offering advice as to how they can do things better so that overall the world pays more attention and engages more with Sri Lanka, and we can help facilitate that. So growth is very much a center point of what we're trying to achieve here.
Tanya, you did speak very broadly about some of the challenges that you said you'll face, and one was about investment.
Right.
But is there anything else in terms of the market that you see that might inhibit growth, or some challenges that you might face from? Because this business is becoming very global in that sense. People like Amazon and Alibaba are now thinking of becoming logistics companies. And so how do you find this? Customers change orders almost every 10 days or more, and you have to give visibility. What are the challenges that you're seeing to grow this business with global competition?
See, we are always comparing ourselves with countries like Dubai or Singapore.
Okay.
Comparing, benchmarking is always good. But if we don't have a strategy and policy, and if we don't have consistent plans to implement these, I don't think we will be able to compete ourselves with Dubai or Singapore. We shouldn't be benchmarking ourselves with Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is much behind Sri Lanka. If you look at it, the challenges we find today, the infrastructure. We are talking about creating a hub, Sri Lanka as the hub, Silk Road. The strategic location is very important, and we are strategically located in a very good place. But if we don't have infrastructure supporting this, we will never get to the next level. We will never be able to bring the investment into the country, compete ourselves with the larger players, encouraging e-commerce. For example, you spoke about Alibaba and Amazon.
Yeah.
So they will look at e-commerce. We have to be able to competitive. How we bring investment, once again, I must emphasize the size of the market. We're very small. So we have to look at creating a hub, use Sri Lanka as a hub. For us to do that, infrastructure is a key. Look at the railway systems we have. Look
So
at,
are you saying the investment must come from government?
see, the setting infrastructure to facilitate business, I believe in some way it's the responsibility of the government. Private sector must bring the business. So there are either the government, if they are not in a position, they should look at either privatize or have a PPP. Look at our facilities at the airport, port, railway. Right? The railway was built long years ago to move tea and spices. Today we are not even using rail system to move cargo. Yeah. So we are way behind. We benchmark, we talk, but we do not have a policy, or we don't have a plan, one voice that works with the government and the private sector to look at the critical masses, critical requirement.
Okay, so you are in a very difficult situation. You are saying largely the success of your business, the way you have framed it, sits largely on how well the government sets up its policies and sees the importance of making some strategic investment. So we'll probably come to that. Suresh, you spoke about policy, and before we get to people, because both Stephen and Jim spoke about how people can be a big change in growth and and that's also another point that we need to talk about. But before we get to that policy, what specific policy or policies is affecting the growth of your business?
Of the beer business, the alcohol policy. that's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So let me just explain this in a second. Alcohol policy is all about balancing the health and productivity needs of a nation, on the one hand, with its revenue needs. So just think of a scale and think of where you find the balance. Okay, so there would be, if you are a very rich country, you might say, fine, we will just tilt this towards the health and productivity side and not so much to the revenue side. Now, if you're a relatively poor nation, you might say, look, we will tilt it a little towards the revenue side and maybe slightly less towards the health and productivity side. The thing here is, though, that you should never tilt it one way or the other in terms of an extreme. You've got to find a right balance. Now, unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, year in and year out, what we've done is we've tilted the balance very much in favor of revenue, not so much in favor of health and productivity. So fundamentally, Sri Lankan alcohol policies have promoted the consumption of high alcohol products, whether legal or illegal. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, from a policy and a country perspective, is this the right strategy for the country? Now, I know I have an interest in this because I'm in the beer business, and so you might think that I'm being biased. I obviously am in a certain way, but think about it. It's also a pretty logical argument. So from a beer business perspective, it's the alcohol policy that's holding it back. I do agree that, what Stephen and Jim said about talent, it's important, it's critical. But if you look at our business, we can overcome most of these things as long as there is a level playing field, a balanced policy which is in place. So for us, that's the critical one.
Okay, but you are going to face a situation like the tobacco industry, where clearly you need to find, you are going to bet on people drinking more, or are you thinking of a fundamentally different way to look at this business as, in a very fundamental way?
Not so much people drinking more, but it's people drinking differently.
Okay.
Yeah, so there is a difference. And if you move beyond beer, I mean, beer is beer and it's a small segment and all that. And if you look at it from a country perspective, Peter, and this is, I think, where the real importance lies. If you compare Sri Lanka with some of the other successful nations in Southeast Asia, what you see, if you look at it very carefully, is that in Southeast Asia, or everywhere in the world, you've got to make a compromise between economics and politics. At the end of the day, it's a political economy, okay? Now, if you look at the Southeast Asian example, and think of countries like Singapore, countries like Thailand, countries like Malaysia, the compromise has been made in favor of economics. In Sri Lanka, year in and year out, we tend to make the compromises in favor of the politics. And as a result of this, the Sri Lankan economy has not reached its true potential. And if we continue down this road, although Sri Lanka has a fantastic set of, Sri Lanka has amazing opportunities, But unless we make those compromises in favor of the economics, unfortunately, Sri Lanka is not going to hit the potential it really has. Okay. I think it was Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew who once said Sri Lanka tends to auction resources it does not have. And I think that summarizes the whole story.
So we come to the end when we talk a little bit about the country and the economics and all of that, because I'm not so sure whether you can cut such a fine line between the politics and the economics, because they are completely intertwined, and maybe you can share some more thoughts about that. Stephen, the one thing that people are worried about, or what keeps their mind occupied, is not just growth, but growth that can create significant value to shareholders over the long term. And I think one of the key things about creating value, value-driven growth, not just earnings growth, one of the key challenges is differentiation. Now, when you take your business, I can see differentiation in the FMCG, for sure. Things like your other business, growing businesses, hospitals and all of that. Where are the big challenges that you're seeing, sitting there managing HEMAs and all of these businesses? Where do you see that big, significant differentiation that's going to come, or that you're driving, that will bring extraordinary value to your shareholders over the long term?
Delivering extraordinary value sounds like a tough challenge, but I do my best. So as I think about creating value, undoubtedly, I agree with you 100%. It's about differentiation. It's about a connect with your consumers that says, these guys have really got something that I want, that gives you that bit of positioning. So, that's what one wants to achieve. I think the starting point of all of this is actually in people. Because I think we live in a world where, say, particularly the hotel industry, just about anything you do that is differentiated can be copied the next day by a competitor. Yep. If you think about a different menu, you think about a different, way of sort of kitting out the room or whatever you do across most service industries, we live in a world where it can be replicated tomorrow. So your ability to differentiate is actually about your people capacity to be continuing to innovate and continuing to sort of push for new ideas. It's all about people. And I think that reflects across all of our businesses, whether it be hospitals, pharmaceuticals, hotels, inbound, outbound travel, and our consumer businesses. It has to be about people development. It has to be about great people achieving really great things, because that's the world we live in. You've got to continue to push. You've got to continue to look outside yourself for fresh ideas as well, because it's tough generating them internally all the time. So for me, the differentiator can only lie in people.
On that point, and I'll come back to a specific example later, Stephen. Jim, now you spoke about bank and the importance of people, but you must have heard of Atom Bank, the bank in England that's just got a license to start banking, and the only thing they are going to do is bank on mobile. Smartphone and application, that's it. And now there is a survey that says most Brits do their banking on their smartphone than online or branch. So I'm beginning to see that in the banking industry, there's going to be a big disruption. There already is in your payments, for example. There's Apple Pay, there's Alipay, and all of these companies like DBS Bank is buying into Apple Pay because they're disrupting your payment system. So is it necessarily true, or is it a little old-fashioned to think that people are going to make a change in banking? Or is some disruptive bank like Atom going to take business away from traditional banks like you by providing an extremely unique technology-driven experience?
When you use the word bank and banking, obviously it's a very generic term. You have to be a little more specific. If you're looking at a certain level of consumer banking, for example, if you're reaching out to a certain demographic of people, you will have to adjust your strategy accordingly. And technology has a role to play that can be very, very important, very central. Your consumer also each person has a different need in a bank. Some just want a payment system. They want a payment system that's easy, fast, and not very expensive. Technology can further that today more than ever before. Technology is also used to reach the unbanked. There are the opposite examples in countries like Kenya, for example, where there's an amazing development there with technology, because of technology, in bringing such a large percentage of the population into the banking world. So technology has a very important role to play across the full spectrum of banking. It can be used in corporate world in facilitating trade transactions and the movement of documents over through the internet and whatnot. So,
but why are the banks so slow in adopting this, Jim?
Well,
I find
slow's
banks are the slowest.
Slowest compared to what?
There's nothing of that we see here in Sri Lanka. You don't
no,
provide
you'd be surprised.
any real new experience. What's stopping? Is it the very high spreads that we enjoy in this country that banks are complacent and happy to, show all those profits on your balance sheet?
After tea, we'll have a special session just on banking for anybody who's interested. Look, it's in the eye of the beholder. It depends on your point of view. You want to take a very highly developed country like the UK, for example, and compare its banking system to Sri Lanka's, not a fair comparison. And you can use
Why
that.
not?
Why?
Because
Serious?
no, in the sense that the more people in Asia use smartphones, and they are smartphone savvy, and they're happy to.
Well, the financial services industry is very different country by country. Its regulations, its development, it varies significantly. Some currencies aren't even tradable in the world today, and others are completely tradable, right? So it follows that technology and regulations will be embraced and will be implemented differently in different countries, okay? In this country, technology is starting to play a role amongst banks. They're using them in their back office processes. They're using them in some of their reporting requirements. They're starting to embrace technology. You don't see it on the streets, perhaps, yet. Some of the automatic teller machine technology is also improving and allowing for more flexibility. So it's a process. It's going to take time. There's not one size that fits all anywhere in the world, but I think the important theme is technology has a very important role to play in this industry. You will see it more prevalent as time goes by. Now remember, technology is expensive. The incorporation of technology in its early stages in the 80s and 90s in the United States was a major driver of consolidation. Two banks, each one had the same bill for technology, said, why do we each pay it? Let's put our banks together and pay it once. It's a very basic example. But the point is, it will drive change, like you're suggesting. It will drive consolidation. It will improve service. It'll bring things to market faster. And it will be embraced by different organizations in different manners according to their needs, according to their strategies, according to their customer client group and the environment, regulatory and legal environment that they work in. Because those environments, remember, dictate how easy or not the use of technology can be also. And in some of these developing countries, the level of development in that regulations, it needs to adapt as well so that technology can be embraced further.
Okay, so we'll come to that because Alipay from China, I wouldn't call China a very advanced country, but they've completely disrupted the banking system. But I take your point about adoption of technology can differ from country to country. One last round of questions from me on talent, and then we'll open it to the audience. Stephen, you spoke about people and the importance of people, and yet we struggle. The biggest problem we have, even the company that I run, to find good people. What is this about finding good people? What is the problem? I mean, there are good people. Is it the way we... Wait, let me not suggest anything. Tell me, what's the difficulty?
I don't see the problem.
Okay. So you don't have a talent problem
Of
as
course,
far as...
every business has a talent problem. I mean, it's
Yes.
slightly facetious, but it is one of these ones that, I would say that there's this very common refrain in corporate Sri Lanka that, we just can't find people, it's so hard, you don't find, and it's the government's fault, the university system, and it's so-and-so's fault. It is all everybody else's fault. I sort of take the attitude, I've been in and around Sri Lanka now for the best part of the last 20 years, and I meet lots of very intelligent and capable young men and women. And so I sort of take the view that my experience in South Asia is one that if one's waiting for the government to do something, it could be a long wait. Therefore, get on and do it yourself. And if the government does good stuff as well, well, that's a bonus. We're all happy. So I look at it as being all about, are we as corporates stepping up to the mark in terms of talent development? And I would have to say, in my experience, again, across multiple businesses across South Asia, I don't think I've seen a single business that I believe takes talent development seriously enough.
They don't take
Don't.
It.
Yeah. And I think that's true of us at Haymas. We're pushing hard to sort of upgrade what we do in this respect. I still think a lot of that happens around talent development and training of people is almost like it's kind of like well, you've done a good job here, go on a training course type of stuff. I mean, that's
so what would be some of the benchmarks that you might use to see, okay, here are the benchmarks, now I can say that we are truly serious about talent. What would those benchmarks be?
Okay, well, I was in a meeting the other week with one of the HR leaders from across our group, and I thought, what she had done was a great example in terms of people development. She had, worked hard with a senior professional. They'd identified weaknesses in his capabilities, particularly in terms of how he managed his team. And she'd sat down and designed an intervention. And that's kind of all good stuff. That's kind of what HR people do, isn't it? But the bit that she'd done that was clever for me was she'd then gone back and done a 360 and got feedback from all that individual's team members after the intervention and worked out, was the intervention actually succeeding in achieving objectives? And thankfully in this case it was, but it's that taking people development as a really serious and as scientific a process as one can when people are involved. And it's being very clear about what our aspirations are and needs in terms of developing an individual, designing interventions, and being able to measure outcomes. Because I think if you take that perspective on it, it just makes this whole idea of talent development a much more serious and as measurable as possible. Because I think you've got to try and measure this stuff. You've got to really say, is what we're doing in terms of talent development really producing an outcome?
Suresh, on that point, how you have been with the chamber and you have had exposure to lots of Sri Lankan companies, and Stephen makes the point that he doesn't think lots of companies really put that kind of focus on talent development. What has been your experience? How do boards look at this? I mean, as Stephen said, you can spend a little money and say, we send people on training, we have a career path and all of that, but how much of their earnings are they spending on truly building capacity among their people? And I'm talking about across the company, not just at the very, very senior level, but at critical functional levels. And how boards happy to spend that kind of money, given the fact that they're all keeping an eye on the price of the share market and largely focused on short-term earnings?
Peter, I'm not so sure that it's all about the money. I mean, let me take my personal example, if I might. I've been to only one training program since I worked now for since 1986 in the private sector after KPMG, which is the accounting training part.
But you come out well. I'm just kidding.
Depends on whom you talk to. So let me tell you, I mean, the thing that happened, if I was just to continue on my example, was that when I joined my first private sector firm, I had just qualified as an accountant. I went into this firm and I suddenly realized that I didn't know a thing about commercial accounting. And here I was, a qualified chartered accountant, and I realized I didn't know a thing about commercial accounting. What really turned me around was that the managing director whom I worked for put you in the deep end. Okay? He did hold your hand up to a point, but he put you in the deep end. He gave you loads of responsibility and gave you tremendous space. Okay? So we learned from the mistakes that we made. And he said, you go ahead and make your mistakes, don't bust the company up. If you make a mistake, make sure you can pay the company back, kind of thing. Right? And to me, that was the best learning because I learned from my mistakes. Now, I think the biggest, the investment that businesses don't make in Sri Lanka, it's not so much about the money, it's that they don't give you the space to make the mistakes.
Oh.
Because if you make the mistakes, then you learn.
Yep.
Right? It's way superior to going to some training program. Right? I think that's where the Sri Lankan companies make the mistake.
So in essence, you're saying managers must then be trained and developed to see this, that mistakes are,
Peter, it's a very simple thing. All of us, okay, I think the most critical thing that we do in life is to bring up kids.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you can't get beyond that. And if anyone can raise a kid well, compared to that, what's the responsibility that you have within an organization? It doesn't compare. So if there is anyone who can raise a child and bring that child up well in this world, why can't you give him responsibility give him or her responsibility in an organization? So I think that's the real step that organizations need to make. Give people the responsibility. Let them, they will make mistakes, and I think say yes, they will, and let them make those mistakes, but then make them understand how the mistake was made and how they don't repeat that mistake. I think somebody doesn't believe me.
That's right.
So I think this is where I find the Sri Lankan companies lacking.
Right, thank you. And sorry, Jim and Tanya, will come to you a little later because I think it's time for the audience to ask a few questions, and I will throw it open to you guys to ask a few questions from the panel. Oh, there are questions already? Okay, yes. Jim, can you read that? There's a question right up there for you. Jim, a great bank like SCB can take a lead in partnering the government for growth. How much of a lead are you planning on taking? Tanya, there are two questions for you.
Yep.
Hello? Thanks. As a rule, as a daily activity of ours, we have staff, great staff, who make it their business to partner, our business, to partner with the government. And whether it's to advise them on debt management, we help them raise their foreign-denominated bonds. We help them manage the exposure of that debt and spread it out more conveniently for themselves. We help them in the banking system work on things like anti-money laundering methodologies of detection, suspicious activity reporting, all things that are now mainstays of the payment system globally. And so whether it's partnering with the central bank, which is a natural, both our boss, our regulator, and a good client, if you will, we work with some other ministries if we can help them with a payment system or help them with different project finances. That's another place where we can add some value. So I would say to the person who's asked this question, we play as much of a lead role as we can. We make sure that our expertise and capabilities match whatever a particular government agency organization would like, and we are able to bring resources from around the world. Recently we've had some in town to help. And in all the countries where we have a presence, as our brand promise says, we're here for good. And that does mean that we're here for help the sovereign as well as the private sector.
Suresh, there's a question here for you. Suresh, what do you think about the President's decision to directly intervene in changing the government policy on reducing beer taxes? And what does this do to business confidence?
I won't speak as a representative of the beer industry.
Yes.
But speaking as a Sri Lankan...
Maybe you should ask Stephen about this then.
Possibly,
I'm just kidding. Just go ahead.
As a beer consumer or what?
But as a Sri Lankan, I would have thought that, there are more pressing issues that a president needs to deal with.
Sure. So there you go, short answer. Tanya, we see a decline in the number of vessels coming to Sri Lanka, thereby affecting import lead times, especially from Taiwan. Is the shipping industry working together to improve the situation?
Yeah, for sure. We are working on that. Not only from Taiwan, we have seen last several months, several vessels are bypassing Colombo for various reasons, due to the time constraint, due to the freight rates coming down. The ship owners look at the profitability of the route. If the rates are going to come down, and if the customers are demanding more and more lesser rates, we will see more and more callers not turning into Colombo. So this is something that we are, from industry level, we are having a lot of discussions with the ship owners as well as our ultimate customers to find a solution.
Thank you. Stephen, maybe you should have a go at this. It's not to anyone in particular. Why can't many Sri Lankan corporates not reach global level? In other words, why can't we build world-class companies such as Samsung and Apple?
I think the answer to that question is why not? I mean, I'd throw that one back. I don't see why we can't build world-class companies. I mean, I actually was out with a friend who works for Nike at the weekend, the world's largest sportswear manufacturer. And they say to me, we learn more from our manufacturer here, who we all know it is, MAS, than we do from any of our partners anywhere in the world. And they know better than anybody else in the world. So I think the argument I would make is that we can build truly world-class businesses.
But we aren't building many. I mean, anyway, world-class businesses can't be, in their thousands. But is there something else behind this question? Is there some, we don't see a lot of this. I think that's where the question is coming from. There are few and far between in terms of, I don't know, I'm just posing the question.
I would look at it the other way around. I'd say I think there's some good examples for us, whether they are in the apparel sector with the likes of an MAS, or whether it's in Dilma as a brand that has now got true global recognition. So I think there are, my response is there's examples there that say it can be done. So I think we've all got to look at ourselves and say, why aren't we doing it? Okay. The opportunity that exists is there for us. And it's one of the things I feel very passionately about, is that we must be building Sri Lankan brands.
So if you were to pick one business
of value sits.
Sorry, after you finish. Sorry, you're talking about brands.
Yeah, and that's where value sits. And that's where differentiation sits. If you can have a brand that truly resonates with your consumer set, and they go, yeah, these guys are great, they're producing something that's of consistently high quality, that's meeting and surpassing my expectations. That's really where you want to be. And if I was the finance minister, I would be trying to push my policy towards really developing Sri Lankan brands, because to me, it's value, it's differentiation. We've got to go there. You look at, I don't want to say it, but by the way, you look at, many of the significant businesses that are here are a reflection of global corporate brands. And I think, we've got to claim a big piece of that pie. Otherwise, you're always a taker, you're not a leader. And I think we should be leaders. Therefore, I think people should drink more lion beer, not that foreign stuff.
So we'll make you finance minister.
Suresh, would you like to? Yes, I would thought that you would, because you've been working with Chamber and all that. Yes.
Leave Chamber aside, but where I come from is simply this: Sri Lankan cricket team is world class. Yeah. Okay, we have the world's highest wicket taker is a Sri Lankan, Muralidharan. Probably the finest left-hand batsman the world has ever seen, Kumar Sangakkara, is also a Sri Lankan. So if we can do this in cricket, why can't we do it elsewhere? And I agree with Stephen entirely, we can do it. If you take the cricket example, just think about this. If Muralidharan played only domestic cricket in Sri Lanka, would he be the world's highest wicket taker? Or if Kumar Sangakkara played only domestic cricket in Sri Lanka, would he be the greatest left-hand batsman the world has ever produced? The answer is no. Murali and Kumar are what they are because they've faced competition. They've gone out there, they've competed, and they've beaten the best. If Sri Lankan industry is to build world-class companies, we need to compete. Not just in overseas markets, but we need to compete in Sri Lanka as well. So protectionism must go. The sustainability of Sri Lankan businesses is not about protection. Sustainability is about competitiveness. And to be able to compete and to become competitive, we need to first compete. So the reason why Sri Lankan businesses, as of now, haven't built too many world-class enterprises is because Sri Lankan businesses do not compete in our home market. We got to learn to compete in our home market first before we can move out. Stephen's example, MAS, Brandix probably, they are what they are because they've gone out and because they've competed. So to me, that's the simple answer.
But Suresh, there's one slight, difference between business and the cricket team because they are not focused on short-term earnings. How much, cricket team, they took years to build this. They invested money, and that's precisely my point. Are Sri Lankan companies thinking long term? Are they making those vital investments, foregoing short-term earnings, saying we are going to build this over 6 years, like, Gamini Disanayaka, whoever it is, ICC, and they quietly built this. But they also had direct foreign investment in terms of the cricket boards paying money to you. So it was all investment with no earnings. But fundamentally, isn't that the problem with businesses that are very short-term earnings focused? And bottom line is one of the topics we're supposed to talk about today.
Businesses will respond to the environment that's there. So if you need to invest X to compete within a given environment, businesses will then invest X. Because at the end of the day, there is a ROI. If businesses, on the other hand, need to invest Y because of the environment, then they will invest Y. So that's what it is.
I'll let it rest. Sorry, Jim and Tanya, you all want to have a go at that question.
Can I just say one quick thing?
Sure.
To the person who asked that very good question, there's a partnership between the public and private sector in all of this as well. Korea set out a goal and objective for itself to create this kind of success over a very long period of time. The nation invested heavily in education throughout so that it would have the kind of talent in its country that could do some of the amazing things that some of the chaebol companies did, and then supported it with policies and procedures and incentivized, to Suresh's point, the private sector to go for it. And look what's happened. And unlikely, you might say, country has emerged as even in some cases greater than the traditional Japanese or others, right? So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen by itself. It happens because key forces, key elements of society, both public and private, find a way to incentivize each other, to work together as the case might be, or to get out of each other's way. Whatever the formula that's required, they find it and they achieve the success. And it can definitely happen in Sri Lanka as well.
See, from the logistic aspect, I think some of our local brands have taken their entities globally. If you look at it, for example, Expo Lanka, today they're competing global level with larger players like DHL, Kuehne + Nagel or Schenkers. So I think in our industry, there's a lot of potential to go out there and create a brand at global level. And some of the companies, Expo Lanka, Haley's, have been very, very successful in taking the brands to global level.
Okay, we'll let it rest because I think the point the question is asking is truly world-class, and Stephen gave a few examples. But any other questions? I think there's one for you, Jim. It says, growing the bank, ? I see your branches around Colombo are closing and you're concentrating the business in Colombo, cutting down staff. How does this reflect growth? Is that a fair statement about your strategy and policy?
Yeah, and I'll answer the other person's question, who goes on to say, we heard of VRS, oh, you moved it. Let me move it down the other way.
Go down.
We heard of VRS and Standard Chartered Bank closed Watala branch. Is that Standard Chartered Bank's downsizing in Sri Lanka? Is Sri Lanka a challenge for multinational banks? The simple answer, and there's nothing simple about it, global organizations go through ups and downs. They go through strong times and difficult times. And when times are challenged, all corporations have to look at themselves carefully and decide whether or not change is required, whether or not some kind of refocusing of strategy is required, and ultimately whether a particular product, a particular service, or a particular market remains strategic. So we're talking about an organization that does business, has a presence in more than 70 countries. Sri Lanka is important to Standard Chartered Bank, but in defining its strategic adjustments, it started to define cities as opposed to entire countries as markets in which it wanted to deepen retail banking, okay? And the good news is that Colombo was one of those markets that it wants to deepen its activities in. So we had 2 branches on the outskirts that weren't as active as the central part. And so we did close those this year. But next year you'll see us investing in a priority banking center inside Colombo, and you'll see us investing in more technology to help facilitate our retail banking activities. And so for our target customer base, we will definitely be growing that service, growing that business, growing the engagement levels with those customers.
Thank you.
LBR LBO Debrief, Business Climate Outlook of 2016.